Hey you guys, how you doing? This is Lost Arts Radio Live for January 18th, 2020. I'm Richard Sachs, your host. We're live worldwide now, and hope you've had a good week. It seems like about 10 minutes since our last show a week ago to me. I was just talking to Doug about how fast time seems to be racing by, and I think it really is speeding up, but clocks are speeding up at the same rate, so it's a little hard to prove. It just feels like that. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. It's a really interesting time to be alive in the world right now. The events, we're in America here, and the events in Virginia are getting ready to heat up for tomorrow. The party that's just getting into power, called the Democrats in the legislature, and they already have the governorship in Virginia, and they're trying to take away basic Second Amendment rights for possessing and carrying firearms. And a lot of people have been brainwashed into not understanding why that matters, and they kind of think that carrying firearms is aggressive and dangerous and violent, and you must be a racist or some horrible person if you want to do that. But that's really not what the idea was in the beginning. The idea was not to solve everything with violence at all, but to prevent it, and that knowing something about the history of governments and private gangs of different kinds and things like that, the founders of America that at least had the ideal concept that it was all a country based on individual freedom, and that the government was just there to protect individual freedom, both inside the country and also at the borders. That's really important, that against invasion, that would be prevented. In other words, if we're losing common sense. At least that's a project of the media and education to try to accomplish that. And they're trying to teach kids and other people that it's a racist idea to protect the borders of your country. But that's a completely ridiculous concept, because it's like if you have a nice house in a neighborhood where there's a lot of crime and not everybody is a nice person, and some of them want to break in and steal everything you have or kill you or things like that. You don't take the doors off your house and leave them off and just go to sleep at night and think everything's going to be really great, because that's not realistic in the world as it is now. As the kind of world that John Lennon talked about in Imagine, where there are no countries and everything's just one happy family where everybody loves and respects each other. I totally agree with that. It's just, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's not really happening right now. And if you try to just be completely unaware of what's around you and don't have any concept of self-defense or taking care of your family or your friends or the people in your country, then your country's gone. So it reminds me, I was listening to a very brave doctor who came out on video this week and said, I was brainwashed in medical school because we don't get taught anything about nutrition or about injecting things into people. You've heard of it as a practice you put compounds through hollow needles into the person's body with this little plunger thing, and it's supposed to prevent disease. That's a total fraud, and that because you look at the history back to Edward Jenner, who started this very strange practice, thought that he could mimic nature, and at that time there were no adjuvants in what they injected into you, and it was still maiming and killing people all over the place, especially children, like it is now. And with 1% of the current kids the families of the kids who are killed or injured in the United States finding this little secret fake court that they have with no jury, and the government fights against you to prove that your child was injured or killed or you were from this practice. About 1% of the people who are injured ever find that court, or the families of the injured, because sometimes the injured person is incapacitated or dead. And even with only 1% finding that fake court, they've paid out over $4 billion in damages since they started, and that's about 1%. So maybe less. You figure that $400 billion worth of damage has been done in injuries and deaths from this practice. And this doctor was saying, maybe it's not really good for people. Maybe it doesn't prevent disease like they say. Maybe the kids really do die sometimes. And we know, we've talked to nurses on the Sunday show that they worked in ICU, in what they call NICU, neonatal ICU, which means just born babies who need intensive care. Like if they're born prematurely, they have to take special care of them. And this nurse says, yeah, they bring in the prematurely born babies, put them on the table and say, get the intensive care ready because we're going to inject them with these shots that are mandated by the CDC, and some of them are probably going to stop breathing and die, and we're going to do it anyway, because that's called, everything like that you have to do or you lose your license. It's called standard of care. It's a really sick joke, that's called care. I mean, this is more bizarre than a horror movie. So this one doctor had memorized this in medical school, where they hear millions of times safe and effective, they don't learn anything about it. They don't even know what's in it. They just say it's safe and effective until you think, oh, everybody knows it's safe and effective, right? Completely false. But you memorize it so many times. It's like the propaganda and cult theory that you hear something enough and everybody around you hears it and they know they have to believe it. And all the people put peer pressure on each other, and you get sleep deprived when you're in medical school or cult training or things like that. And pretty soon you think, absolutely, anybody that thinks it's not safe and effective, they must be a bad person. Maybe they're a racist or a homophobe or something, but they're definitely a terrible person. And they should be in jail if they question what we're doing. Of course, we never learned anything about it. We don't know what we're injecting into people, but it's definitely safe and effective. So this week it turned out that there was a leaked video, as you probably saw, because it was posted on Lost Arts Radio, of the head scientist at the UN using very complex language and trying to make it sound really respectable and everything. But basically it was this lady, head scientist, that was saying, yeah, these babies that are dying from this practice, it would be good if we could explain it better, but we don't really know what's going on. We're just doing it. And they still try and make it sound really scientific and respectable, but it's not either one. So my point is, I'm kind of rambling around the point, is that this doctor came out and said, wow, I've been killing kids in my practice. This might not be a good idea. It might actually be my fault for going along with it. And he still doesn't totally get it. He thinks that in certain cases it might be justified. And I can't think of any, and I've studied the history in great detail. But the reason I brought him up was that he said, and this terrible thing, trying to put a wall at the border of the US. Can you imagine how terrible this thought is, to try to put a barrier at the border of your country so that you can meter who comes in and make sure they're not somebody coming in to bomb your country, or to just hate it, and destroy as much as they can, or whatever not so good reason that they're coming in illegally. Can you imagine how terrible it is to stop them doing that? He was sincere. He really thought, this is because the people in the outside who are coming in are a different color. I mean, it's so stupid. So there's this programming that people get, and not only do they believe it, they get really emotionally attached to it and think that anybody who disagrees with it must be, I don't know what, some kind of demonic entity or something. So the media and the educational system and government agencies and the top corporations have so far managed in America and a lot of other places to brainwash people into ideas that are just beyond ridiculous, that you couldn't imagine anyone would believe. And intelligent people. So it makes it clear that there's really different kinds of intelligence. I'm sure this doctor is a very smart guy, but he bought this total garbage from the media that a wall is bad because it's racist, right? It means, even though he kind of overlooks the fact that within the country, there are all colors of people. I mean, it's not a racist country compared to other places at all. The media is trying to say it is, because they want race war and civil war and the maximum unrest for their own reasons under orders from the bosses above them. And they're doing a great job. But in reality, most people are not like that in this country. I mean, I've lived in it for a long time, and compared to a lot of other places, it's not that way at all compared to how it used to be. But now they're trying to get racism going against people with light skin, because it would look bad if they demonize people with dark skin. So they say, well, that's no problem. We can just say the light-skinned people are the evil ones now, trying to protect their borders. How sinister is that? Even some of the there's one Democrat candidate for president, Tulsi Gabbard, that has one good position, which is don't start wars and invade countries all over the world. You're not supposed to do that. It's not legal. It's not ethical. She's totally right, obviously, about that. But she doesn't think the border should be protected. She says protect it with no barrier, which means that the trains of drugs and all kinds of stuff are just going to keep pouring in, and the country will be destroyed that way. In fact, they're bringing in people with Ebola now, letting them in, and the UN's paying for their transportation from Africa so that they can run across the border illegally. And one of them recently died in a hospital in Texas. And they just happened to have perfected an Ebola injection. I'm not going to say the V word if I can help it, because I mean, I'm sure it's very nice AI, but I'd rather survive it for a while. So this is what's going on as far as that really ridiculous idea of racism. And it's a strange situation, because we're living on a planet where there's a small group of families at the top of the power structure, controlled by a total spirit of evil, and they're addicted to it like a drug, and they think they're some kind of demigods, supernatural beings, because they've been able to set up this complex system of mental and emotional and physical control. And they've got most of the population of 7+ billion people hypnotized into thinking that we're all helpless and we're dependent on the rulers to take care of us and tell us what to do and think. And, people are controlled by fear. And it's possible to do that because we've gotten out of touch with who we are. And I want to say a few things about that. If that changed and we woke up from being zombies, because I know most of you are really up to date on what's going on, but even us that know a lot of those things are like zombies compared to what we could be. So rather than comparing ourselves to people that are running around screaming in the streets completely insane, it would be better to recalibrate and say, how are we compared to what our real potential is? But if we got back that potential and that consciousness, the whole destroy the world enslavement and extermination thing would end, and the rulers would lose control of everybody, and they might even start waking up too, in addition to us. And our goal is not to destroy the bad guys, because the bad guys are something else underneath, not some other kind of alien being or something. We're all from the same source. It's just the programming differs, and that's a really important thing to understand. So in fact, if you're in a play like this one or a movie that we're in, and you're having to play the role of the bad guy, that's not an enviable position. That's what they're having to do. So the scenario of us waking up is what they want to avoid at all costs. And the number one priority in everything that they're doing, and I've looked at it for many decades, and for 20 years I did a really intensive research on the nature and activities of the top rulers behind the scenes on this planet. And they want to keep us full of fear and unconscious, and that's why they want to keep us sick and addicted to medical drugs and all kinds of recreational drugs, thinking that that's freedom. No, it's not freedom. It's just it's understandable, but it's a really poor move on our part. Over-the-counter drugs. It's really helpful to the rulers if we're sick and drugged and our brains are unclear and we're easily controlled by fear. And in fact, if you're on drugs, it takes down energetic level barriers that are meant to protect you from psychic attack of various kinds, like the government has going on all the time against people. You've heard of targeted individuals. And also if they can get fear into everybody, which has been the objective of a lot of old religious rulers and government rulers, then they can get everybody hating each other, because underneath hate is actually fear. You don't need to hate anything or anyone to be effective. Hate is a really low frequency energy, and it doesn't make you stronger. It makes you more crazy and subject to making mistakes. And if just, look at examples, and the greatest warriors and martial artists and even athletes like runners and track meets worldwide and things, they don't have to get afraid before they do what they do. They're the best in the world without needing fear and anything like that. I recently, speaking of the whole race thing that comes from unconsciousness, I watched an interview, I don't know if any of you saw it this week, interviewing Richard Spencer on the show that we can't name because we'll get banned off the major platforms immediately if we mention it, but I think you know who I'm talking about. He interviewed Richard Spencer, who was a total racist, a lot like Hitler was, who Hitler was set up and double-crossed by Britain and the U.S., that's true. But that doesn't mean he's great, a great person. Well, he is underneath, like everybody. Even all the bad people are just being bad because they're highly misled and they have no idea who they are. But that doesn't make them less dangerous. And he really believed that Germany was the home of the super race. Everybody else was subhuman. And so the super race, the Aryan race, should be able to rule the world and displace everybody else. And in his book, which I've read extensively, he says that it's okay to take over other countries and displace those people, either enslave them or kill them. Killing them is more efficient, probably, because they're subhuman. Only the Aryans are really good. It's a lot like many religions have been based on this. Everybody but us is subhuman. We're the best people or the chosen people or whatever, and everybody else is like, below animals. And so if we have to take over their country and murder them, it's really fine, and God likes that kind of thing. These people are a little confused, even though a lot of them are going to hate me for that they, no, God said this, it's absolutely true. You might want to check on the source, that the real God that we came from doesn't do stuff like that, doesn't hate anybody. And you find that out inside yourself. But anyway, the person that was being interviewed was a complete racist and said, yeah, I really care about the other races too. They can live somewhere else. And we just have to have America all for this one race, the people with light skin like him. And that leads to really bad problems. And it also gives a bad name, which media takes advantage of, to anybody that's in the free movement for freedom and truth. And but the main thing is the people who believe that hurt themselves, because it's not true. Same thing was true of Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, that the media and the school systems and the government decided to make into a saint, saying that he wanted to free slaves. He didn't want to free slaves unless it would help kill more people in the South, because they'd lose their workforce. But he didn't like people of dark skin color at all, and he wanted them all to leave the country. That's the truth. And it's well documented. You read a book like, who was it? Lachlan Seabrook. Yeah, I unfortunately wrote it down. I would have forgotten. Everything you were taught about the Civil War is wrong. It's not a racist book, it's truth. And it's exposing the racist president, which was Lincoln at the time, and what he actually did. And the fact that the secession was legal because the states in the United States were separate states. State means country. And Lincoln was saying, no, there's no such thing as that. But the states were independent countries, and they decided to cooperate and confederate. It's like that was the original idea. And it was understood that any of them that said that this is not a good partnership anymore, I'm leaving, there's nothing bad about that. So what we've been taught in history is completely wrong. And Lincoln wanted to deport everybody of dark skin color back to either Africa or the Caribbean or South America, places like that. And he asked for volunteers. But there's racists of all colors, not just light skin like Lincoln and this guy, Richard Spencer. There's black racists and brown racists and yellow racists and red racists and any other kind you can think of. And the only way that any of them can have that attitude is being unconscious of how things really are and who they are. And the mainstream corporate media, of course, wants us to think that there's only racists of light skin color. That's completely ridiculous. And if you have fallen for that, you might want to reconsider. Because if you just even look around for about 10 minutes, honestly, you find out that that's not true at all. It's just people of low consciousness and who are not using their intelligence, they can become racist. And they might say it's because of religion, that the other races are subhuman, or because of some cult that says our skin color is the best and our national ancestry is the best. This is all, it's not even up to the human level, and they think they're the superior beings, and they are underneath, but not in their current consciousness. So the media is saying, oh, this is a great opportunity. We can say that the racists are the people of light skin, and it's terrible all over the country, and it's starting to work. You see these large numbers of people in America. The Democratic Party is really supporting this racist nonsense and trying to make it into a civil war. And we're coming up to a potential flashpoint in what's happening in Virginia right now. If you've been watching that, it's pretty interesting because they've got some really seriously mentally deranged person as a governor, and now he's got the support of the legislature that's all the same party, and they're going to try to take away Second Amendment rights, which I think it's the Declaration of Independence says that the rights, all these rights that are enumerated later in the Constitution, don't come from the Constitution. So it's impossible to take them away. And in fact, if you're in another country that doesn't recognize the rights at all, it doesn't mean you don't have the rights. It just means you have a worse government. But the rights come from God, and when you're born or before you're born, as soon as you exist, you have the rights. And so the governor and the legislature in Virginia are totally criminal, and they're really deranged, and they think that they can just pass a law that you don't have the rights. Or, that when the Constitution in America was written, and there are arguments like, yeah, it's not a legally binding contract because you and I didn't sign it, and arguments like that. But the nice thing about it is that it recognizes some things that are true with or without a contract. You have all your freedoms and rights as long as you don't trample on the rights of other people, which people who are, fighting between races and religions and stuff, they do that. But you don't have to. And even if they got rid of the Constitution and said that you didn't sign the contract or some legal argument like that, they can't get rid of the rights, and they're trying to do that in Virginia right now. So there's a lot of people on the way to Virginia. Many are already there, and tomorrow the action is going to start because it's what's called lobbying day, I think they call it, and it's particularly to promote the Second Amendment rights and remind people why that is. And the reason why that is that you have a natural right that doesn't come from the government to defend yourself, not to go out and hurt other people aggressively, but to defend yourself and your family and other innocent people that need your help. And to take that away means that you're just making people helpless victims, and that's not a good thing to do. And one of the biggest criminals in history, aside from various religious structures that turned out to be very corrupt, is governments. And there was a guy named, I think it was Hummel at the University of Hawaii, who's since died. And he recently did a study on genocide done by governments to their own people in the 20th century, not wars, totally not connected with wars, just killing your own people if you're the government, which has been done a lot more than most people know. And he found out that in the 20th century, the number of people killed by their own governments that way was 262 million. And just in the 20th century, there's another big amount started in this century. And in every case, they had to take away the firearms and the self-defense from the people before they started to murder them. It's clear history. It's not a partisan point of view or a conspiracy thing or anything like that. It's just how governments end up working in most cases. So that was the primary reason to deter that so it wouldn't happen from the Second Amendment. And the Declaration of Independence, which is like an example of that kind of principle for the world, says that the government works for the people and it functions through representatives. That's what makes it a republic. And of course, that doesn't even work unless you have what the founders called an educated population, which has nothing to do with today's educational system. If the people went through that, forget it. I mean, they're not going to be conscious at all. Purpose of modern education is to make sure you can't think clearly at all and have no common sense, because you're taught that that's unscientific, right? But what the founders meant by educated population is conscious population. And there's no system that works without that. So again, it brings back to the remedy for all this stuff. And some people say that racism is natural. It's called tribalism, and it's natural, and that it's been going on through all history. But I'm saying we don't know much of our history. I mean, now it's even the most recent history of the last 100 years or two is not even taught in school on purpose. They want people to not know anything about it. But what I call recent history, the last several thousand years, people have been doing a lot of horrible things. That doesn't make them normal or natural. And it's just like when you're in a country where everybody's sick, like America right now, where they're spending all this money and they think it's healthcare, and what it really is toxic chemicals called medicine, and cutting people's organs out when the toxic chemicals do the work they were designed to do, which they're very successful, by the way. That doesn't mean it's normal. Okay, so normal is not what's necessarily common. No matter, even if it was going on for hundreds of thousands of years, it doesn't make it normal at all. I'm in a situation again where I've given myself little bullet point notes that are like 10 times what I have time to go over, so I gotta skip some of this stuff. But I would say it's important that racism that we're being encouraged to have on the television, and they're saying everybody's racist, watch out. You know, I heard Michael Moore saying that white people, I don't like the term white or black. I've never seen a white person or a black person. There are these different shades of brown and pink and, you know, things like, the only white is like, I can't hold it up right now. It's like a piece of paper, like snow. And I'm sure there are people like that, but I don't think I've ever met one. And black is like coal. And that would be beautiful, but I personally haven't met anybody who's white or black. So, but Michael Moore likes the term, and he's saying anybody who's white is probably a bad person. He said if they're coming, three of them coming toward you on the other side of on the sidewalk that you're walking on, you should cross the street because they're so dangerous. Probably 2 out of those 3 supported the president. So they must be terrible people. I mean, this is the kind of thing that these figureheads are pushing because they want chaos, and they think that we're really, really unintelligent, and we fall for that kind of stuff. But the first misconception that racism is based on is thinking that we're like alien species from each other, whereas really most of the reliable scientist theories say that we originated, all of us, somewhere in southern Africa a couple 100,000 years ago in our current form, and that then different tribes migrated to different parts of the world, and the ones that went into less hospitable environments in extreme latitudes where there wasn't enough sun, and you had to eat walrus fat or something instead of having all this beautiful plant life around you. The body's very smart. In fact, it's self-aware and intelligent, and modern medical science has no clue that that's true, but it's been known for thousands of years to some of the great health teachers, some of whom you would recognize. And the body, the body needs sunlight. Okay, that's why the medical system and the government says it'll kill you and give you skin cancer, and there's no safe exposure level, right? Well, that's because they know at the top. In the middle, they don't know. They think they're saving you from certain death because they've gone through the educational system, and that explains pretty much everything. But it's been known at the top that sunlight is essential for life, not just for plants, but for people too. That's one of the many reasons that they're spraying all over the world and blocking out the sunlight. It's not to save you from global warming or to cover up global warming. It's to poison the earth and block out the sunlight, like they're trying to get rid of the CO2, both of which are essential for life. So anyway, what I was trying to say, using up too much time here, is that when parts of the original people migrated to where there wasn't enough sun and there were long winter times and stuff like that, the body said, oh, I'm not getting enough sun. This is serious. I need to decrease the amount of melanin, the pigment in my skin, which if they came from the tropics, which they all did, it was too much, and they had to make it lighter and lighter over generations. And so the people that stayed in the north got really light-skinned, and they started looking like a different race, different food, different living conditions, and the bodies adapted. It doesn't mean they were some alien race or species or something. And the ones who stayed around the tropics stayed dark. And this is another reason why if your family for generations stays in the tropics and you have really dark skin, because it's filtering out the sunlight that you need down to the right amount to penetrate your body, which is, it tries to do it perfectly. And then you suddenly move within one generation or maybe two to a temperate zone like the northern US or Canada or somewhere like that. You're going to have different health challenges because there's too much melanin. It's blocking out sunlight that you need. And if you have dark skin, you need more sunlight. In my opinion, I can't medically tell you what to do, nor do I want to, because you're in charge of your own health. But I'm just putting out this hypothesis, which I'm sure is right. And I've heard some other people that I can't mention on the air say it because they've already been banned, that people with dark skin in an environment with less than optimal sunlight are going to have more susceptibility to many health problems. But it's totally ridiculous for these different groups that are adapted to different climates to hate each other, and they came from essentially one family, but there's a deeper reason that racists, any color of racists, are wrong. And I know this is going to sound strange, but you already know I'm way out of the normal box of thinking and probably think I'm too strange already. So I'll go ahead and say this because the time is really important now. It's going by fast and it's very valuable. And the rulers of this planet are trying to create chaos, make everybody as sick as possible, fighting each other, hating each other, fearing of each other all the time, fear of everything actually, thinking that we're all alien from each other so they can finish off the plan of enslavement, followed by not just population reduction, but extermination of life on the planet. I disagree with Mike a little bit in detail on that because he and many other people say that there's going to be, at least they're going to try to have an elite remnant left on the planet. And I'm saying, no, actually they're not. It's a suicide mission. And it's not quick suicide. They have the technology to do that right now with no problem. And they're not doing it. It's because it's a step-by-step ceremonial sacrifice, and we're the sacrificial animal in this case, which I would vote against being the animal, so would think that you do too. But the deeper reason that the racism is completely ridiculous is because there are thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of accounts that are not publicized much from people all over the world with varying degrees of memory of times before this current lifetime, past life memory, not just from regression, but actual verifiable existence prior to the current lifetime, where they can take their new parents back, show them where they buried something or did something that can be found, and it gets confirmed. And the people who believe that's impossible, because there are a lot of belief systems that say, no, that's absolutely impossible. You only hear one lifetime and that's the end of it. And I don't want to talk about it because that's the truth. And it's the equivalent of saying the science is settled, except in spiritual issues. But there are a lot of people who have been able to prove that they were here before. And guess what? They weren't always the same race. That's an interesting concept, right? Because maybe some of the white races could have been slaves in the past, or vice versa, or any combination like that, because nature isn't random or chance, and everything that situations that we encounter in life are exactly tailored to what we're ready to deal with and based on what we've done before. It's a long subject and very interesting in my opinion. So what does it mean that some people have some memory? And no, wrong guess. It doesn't mean they're all crazy. It means with these large number of verified past experiences, it means that race is irrelevant. In fact, well, it's not totally irrelevant because your body is a certain race. In other words, it comes from people who lived maybe in the extreme north or south for a long time, and so your skin doesn't have much melanin in it. Maybe even your hair is light colored and stuff like that. Or maybe your family lived in the tropics for generation after generation until the last one, or maybe you're still there. And so because there's a lot of sun and your body is very smart and it screens it to the right amount to get through, your skin might be dark, but the point here is that's your costume. It's not you. And I know many people just cling to their, pride in their national heritage and all this stuff. That's fine. But using it to think that we're better than everybody else, no matter what group we're in, causes a lot of problems. I don't know if you've noticed, but it doesn't create harmony in the world. And everybody's sure that their group is the best, that fight over this kind of stuff. But the truth is that the people who have some experience in the past, and some of them remember going through birth and death and things like that, and know that it's not exactly what we've been told. There's a lot of secrets being kept from us. This is one of the larger ones. And they know that the vehicle is formed in the mother's body because of the presence of the person directing the lineup of the genes and things like that. It's not vice versa. It's because you're there, or else no cell division would start. So it's not part of the mother's body. It's supported by the mother's body. It's a new person right from the beginning. And that leads to all kinds of other interesting concepts. So every one of us is driving one of these vehicles, these bodies that are actually conscious vehicles. They're amazing. They're intelligent, like the chiropractors discovered, David Palmer and his son BJ. And that was the great start of chiropractic, built around the idea that bodies are actually intelligent. There's an intelligence in the body, and I'm saying it's more than that. The body is self-aware and conscious. Why? Because in the very beginning, that's what anything was made out of. There wasn't, as I've said many times, a Home Depot or lumber yard that they could make things out of for forms. There was only consciousness. And if you cut it down further and further and further and get beyond the subatomic level and the empty space that seems to be solid and all that, and that's a long subject also, but consciousness is behind the whole thing. Even energy wasn't there until it came from consciousness. And it's hard to define things in words that are so limited, but once you even grasp part of that, you think, wait a minute, if we're all from exactly the same source, we're not just one family. We're aspects of one being that includes everybody. That's the end of racism, if you understand it. It's gone. There's no possibility of it. and there's nowhere else to go except back to where we came from in the end. So while we're here for a very brief time, testing out these bodies and minds that we're in to experience the physical level for a short time, learning all kinds of lessons, hopefully, and gaining wisdom from the experience, which would make more sense. Hating each other because of differences in costumes is like below non-intelligent. I don't even know what to call it. It doesn't mean that the people who are there are bad, because everybody is exactly the same in essence. Nobody's going to be lost forever, even though humans love to say everybody but them is going to be thrown into permanent torture because God loves them so much. It's just obvious, right? But those concepts of God have led to massive wars and genocide. And there are beings like that may seem supernatural to people, but they're not the one that we came from. That's different. There's a harmony and a love there, not hatred of anything. And humans love to say, well, God really hates this, and so do I, because I'm aligned with God. And it's like if ants had a God, it would be like a big ant, right? It would be a male ant, and it would be taller than the other ants, and it could sting faster, and it would really hate the wrong color ants and stuff like that. That's how you would know it was the God ant. That's kind of the level of intelligence that humans are at in recent history, going back, 10, 20,000 years. So race applies to the costume. It can change. I know the people who are really into racism probably won't listen to this, or will think that I'm just a complete evil person for suggesting that racism isn't totally justified. But I have to tell you the truth, and you'll have to say it when you realize it too. Racism is totally ridiculous. And hating anybody, even the worst people, is completely counterproductive. It doesn't mean not to defend yourself. You have to do that. That's why the Virginia thing is legitimate. But for the people that are, protesting the government actions, but hating other people is not necessary for defending yourself and your rights and other people and stuff. They're not the same concept at all. Once you realize who's inside the costumes, the biggest victims are the worst of the bad guys, men and women, of course. Women have proven that they're equal now, right, in being as terrible as men in a lot of cases. Even at the rulers of the countries have shown that. But once you start to understand this at a deeper level, you're not out there like the guy on the interview I talked about, just saying, well, we need to stand up for our race. Well, it wasn't always your race, okay? You don't know where you came from. You trace your lineage through blood and mothers and fathers and things like that. That's really not where you came from. That's where your current costume came from, and you can trace the bloodlines of that, but not of you, because you're not physical. And I know a lot of people are going to just say, oh, this is totally ridiculous. This guy's got a bunch of new age fantasies, and I'm not talking about that. This is something that actually is real. Although you won't know that unless you experience it. But if you're even open to considering it, you know that in a movie, there are actors and characters, right? Like Harrison Ford played Solo. Harrison Ford wasn't Solo in Star Wars. Harrison Ford was Harrison Ford. He was a human with his own life and everything. But in the movie, he did a really good job playing Han Solo. So who was the real being there? Not Han Solo. Han Solo came from a script and a screenplay, right? Harrison Ford was actually a person. That's what's going on here. All these characters and these costumes that are really wonderful and can do all kinds of things for you in your life, it's not you. And the actor or the actress playing that role is you. But the acting is so good that he or she thinks they are the character. And the whole issue of stopping the chaos and the mass murder and the fear and the evil rulers being sure that they're the evil rulers and they don't know who they are. The issue is the character has to become Well, the actor has to stop thinking that they are the character and wake up. Waking up doesn't mean reciting all the bad things going on in the world. It's much deeper. And mind is carrying the script of our character from one life to the next, and the body is formed to fit the part. And even the worst characters are played by the same kind of actors and actresses, non-physical beings. Remember, it was said that you were made in the image of God. That's not that you have to have exactly the right body that looks like God or something. It's not about physical. We are made in that image, and it's entirely spirit. It's not subject to all this physical stuff. It's just playing the part. And that's the biggest secret that I found that the rulers are keeping from everybody, is who they are. Because if you think you're the character, they can keep war going forever until they're done wiping everybody out. And I don't think that's a very good thing to have happen. If the bad guys, the worst of the bad guys and the bad women, if they started getting jarred awake, they would think, wait a minute, what in the world am I doing? You know, but if people don't wake up, and the good and bad people, so-called good and bad characters in this play, realize who they are, then the war keeps going on, and their vision of hell on earth and extinction of life, people dying full of hatred and regret and vengeance and fear, all kinds of unfinished business of all kinds with enemies and friends demanding a return to this scene or one like it, that'll keep going, and it's not going to be fun. In the East, they call it karma. And in the West, sometimes they call it reaping what you sow. It has deep meaning. And all of that karma that the Eastern teachers are talking about not being able to get away from is embedded in the mind programs, like in the Matrix, you know. So as long as we're convinced that we're that character, there's no way out. It just keeps going and going and going. That cycle keeps going, and the suffering is indescribable. All based on false identity. And that's really the issue, and it's the biggest secret that the rulers are keeping by having everybody distracted in everything that's false and as sick as possible, by the way. So what happens if only a few people wake up? I think there's some critical minimum that if it's reached, then the consciousness would spread by like a wave, by what's called resonance. So in the meantime, if we're lucky enough to even think about that, how we might do it, and mostly we're too busy, you know, defending all kinds of things that are false. But, you know, what's the benefit of being racist? Only the people who are not very intelligent think that war is good, and that's where racism always goes. War and mass murder. And we talked about karma. The way karma works is that whatever you intentionally do to or for somebody else gets multiplied and comes back to you. And it can be traced life to life. It's not imaginary. It's not some kind of belief system. It's real. And once you even start thinking that that could possibly be true, then you start watching your own actions more than criticizing everybody else. Because the ones that matter are what you're doing, and they're the only ones you're responsible for. So if we're untrue to ourselves, then we have bad results, and not necessarily right away, but the seed is planted. So it all depends on knowingly doing things that you know are not right. If you're a teacher teaching kids nonsense and self-hatred and gender confusion and, you know, hiding what they're doing from the parents and all kinds of stuff. And this kind of false teaching is going on not just in elementary school, where they're teaching kids they should be surgically mutilated to become the other sex, as if you could even do that. It goes on up to medical school level and PhD level, where they're teaching the basics of all kinds of race division and gender division and people with light skin being evil. And this is what the universities are up to now, even in the PhD programs. I know I'm in the middle of that stuff right now. And if you're working for a biotech company, knowingly corrupting the gene pool of the planet, if you're a high-level banker and you're knowingly stealing all the money that the people are earning in the world and devaluing the currency and stuff. If you know you're doing that and you keep doing it, if you're in the medical system and you're knowingly doing things to kids and adults that harm or kill them, pretending that it's actually medicine and calling the bad real effects side effects, so nobody will really understand what it is. You know, if you're in agricultural industry and you're knowingly putting poison into the earth and teaching other people to do that, poisoning the food, spraying horrible things on the food, which people then eat and get cancer and all kinds of other things. It's all whether you're knowing what you're doing. If you're intentionally doing this, if you're in the high levels of the energy technologies and you're part of hiding the established free and clean energies, like the car that drove on water all over the country already, and prove that you don't need CHO for fuel, you can use H2O. That's been well proven, and the man who demonstrated it, of course, didn't even commit suicide. He was just flat out murdered. It's even still on the internet. If you're in the telecom industry trying to convince people that Wi-Fi and 5G are not harmful, that's serious crime to do that if you know the truth. Or if you're in the mainstream corporate media, knowing that you're fooling people for money, even though if it's going to have really terrible results. If any of these organizations, if you're in the UN, CFR, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg, or others, secret societies, and you're knowingly moving toward the agenda of enslavement and extermination, you're ruining your own future. Your bosses aren't telling you the truth. And it doesn't matter about who you hear of this from. I'm not significant at all, but the concept is important to you because you don't want to destroy your future by what you're doing. If you harm other people intentionally, then it comes back to you, and you don't get away from that by thinking that your super evil rulers are going to protect you if you obey them. It's not going to happen, because there are laws of nature that work. Whether we know about them or not, doesn't matter what religion you're in or what you believe or anything. It's cause and effect on this level. We're all connected at a deep level, not physically, well, physically we are too, but much more on a spirit level, and we have the same source and the same essence, the same place we came from, and we're all going back to the same place through various different routes. We literally do to ourselves whatever we do or even think toward others. So if you're hooked on the drug of evil and you're part of that power structure, and you think, wow, this is exciting, we're about to win, and we're successfully enslaving the world, and those dumb people are falling for all this fake stuff in the media and all this fake medicine and fake agriculture and food production and energy stuff and all that. That's not a really brilliant thing to be proud of, because you can't escape the results of it. So racism is just irrelevant to all this stuff. And it doesn't save you to have a high IQ there. A high IQ is a very valuable tool, but you see examples of it all over the world. There are some of the people very high up in the evil power structure who are very intelligent on an IQ test, but they're very dumb because they don't know that what they're doing to everybody else, they're doing to themselves literally, not as a belief. They just have to wait and they'll find that out. But I'm just saying, why find that out the hard way? Just, find it out now. It's not a religion. It's the way things work here. And if you're in a high power position doing a lot of harm, you could use that position to do a lot of good, and that will come back to you. And you have a much better future that way. And I'm sure you're not going to pay any attention to it, but I have to mention it to you just in case. So think about it again, what you're doing. And even at the top corporate levels, arrogant bosses in the $5,000 or $10,000 suits thinking that they've got it all made now, are overlooking an important detail, you might say. A lot of successful people in Hollywood, even if they listen to any of this, would say, well, I've already had to pledge allegiance to Satan, and this is really true. I don't know if you know about it, but Bob Dylan's talked about it publicly on television, and he said he had to pledge allegiance to Satan, and it's real. This is not just something you say. He got very successful right after that, but it wasn't from a very good source. And he's thinking that now he has no way out, and he's talking about how, he has to get ready to give his life to where he got this power from. But that's not true. That's a hoax. Your spirit is far more powerful than any evil, anything, because evil is based on complete misconception. It's all underneath. Everybody's the same. You can pull out of it anytime you want to. You're not, whatever contract you sign with that is not binding. And of course, the person you signed it with is going to say it's binding, but it's not. Any contract with evil is something you can leave whenever you want to. And it's your own going along with it that keeps it in force. That's voluntary. So when you understand a little bit more about how this works, and I'm trying to talk really fast, there's some things that you can't do. You can't have any shred of racism anymore. That's just gone. No matter what color you are, you just see it as so ridiculous. You can't hate anybody. You know that the people doing the worst things are the worst victims. You got to defend yourself against them. But your ultimate goal is to help them wake up, because if you were in their shoes, you'd be doing exactly the same thing, looking through their eyes. They need to be saved from that. You can't be arrogant about anything, because you realize what you've done in the past. All of us have made really stupid mistakes that have hurt other people. You can't blame anybody, because you realize, like you didn't in your past, they don't know what they're doing, and they need to find out. You can't throw away any more time, and you can't keep deceiving people. You've got to take advantage of the time you've got left, because all the things now that you can't do anymore, there are some things that you can do. And just because of no more self-deception, there's a beauty and power that can flow through you once you drop those things, and harmony and love start coming into what happens around you as a reaction or reflection to what's going on inside. And you can help replace the dark future that the rulers have planned with the opposite, basically heaven on earth for the time that we're here and for the future. And the dark past is no longer a curse in your life. It's a source of wisdom. So you don't have to hate yourself or condemn yourself at all. And once that gets going and starts growing, there's no darkness and no supposedly scary evil beings or anything that can stand up against you at all. And it's like a wave of color flooding into a black and white movie, and you can be the source of it. So, I'm just saying, you have other options. You don't have to keep going with the evil agenda. It's totally in your hands. So appreciate and use the time you've got left right now. That's my suggestion. The other thing that I would say is that remember our Sunday shows, educational shows, and Joel Skousen number 8 in the series with Joel Skousen is going to be tomorrow night, Sunday. If you want to help us stay on the air and keep going, it's amazing that we're still here, even because we're not doing commercials or anything. We need money if you want to support our work, and we have a Subscribestar account, subscribestar.com/Lost Arts Radio, and we have donate buttons on our two main sites that you might like to take a look at, lostartsradio.com and lostartsresearchinstitute.org. And let's see, what else was I supposed to tell you about? Oh, yeah, Doug has been getting us on new platforms, like some audio platforms, not just Blog Talk Radio, which we're still on, but Stitcher, iTunes, and TuneIn, all of which are active now. We're on Brighteon, which is video. That's a non-censoring video alternative that's really worth supporting. And by supporting, you don't have to give them a bunch of money unless you want to. Just using Brighteon, BRIGHTEON.com, helps them get more traffic and more money to survive on and grow. They're about to start live streaming features. You can upload content there and get away from the censorship. Subscribe to our channel. The subscription feature just got started. And that is brighteon.com/channel/Lost Arts Radio. You can subscribe. It just got started. Planetary Healing Club, if you take any of what I've said seriously and want to actually work with it and learn these tools that you can start transforming your life quality, both in physical health and consciousness tools that are real, then you're invited to Planetary Healing Club. And we do make a little bit of funding from that goes to our nonprofit, LostArtsResearchInstitute.org. And there's small dues. If you are not sure if it's worth your time, you're welcome to ask questions about it. Just email me if you want to. But the access point for that private platform where we talk openly, interactive about all this stuff on a much deeper level is planetaryhealingclub.com, and the meeting is in 30 minutes if you want to check that out. Also get on our mailing list at lostartsradio.com, or you can text a name and an email address to 928-235-46, is it 235? 325, sorry, 4676, or email to info@lostartsradio.com. I think I covered everything. I'm a minute over time. Sorry about that. PlanetaryHealingClub.com if you want to get into the private level. And any questions, just send them to us. I think that's about it. Thanks for spending the time with us. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great week and look forward to seeing you again next time. Talk to you then.